Hello and welcome to Tucson Bitcoin Podcast. Today I have on Aleks Svetski, and we talk about a wide range of topics. But the overall arching theme of this conversation was just about how important Bitcoin is as a disruptive technology in fighting back against government abuses and just any sort of powerful establishment that really seeks to oppress people. And yeah, it was fun to get into. If you want to follow up with me about this conversation or any other one, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm all over the place. Shoot me an email. Pretty easy to find. If you just search the Tucson Bitcoin Podcast, I'll pop up somewhere. But yeah, I'm happy to have these types of conversations, explain things deeper, talk about Bitcoin. If you're new to Bitcoin, I do post a lot of content on Patreon for new users, and or just people that are curious, and you can get access to that for $1. I try to make it pretty accessible to everybody, and I just love your support on this endeavor to really drive adoption of Bitcoin in my community, fight wealth inequality, etc. Hope you enjoy this conversation. All right, and we're recording. Good to have you on, Aleks.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Yeah, man. You've been posting some good content recently. I've been really enjoying it with your new podcast. That first episode that I saw with Gigi and Breedlove it was fantastic. So, good to.
Yeah, I kind of screwed up the audio though, but hey, it is what it is. We're gonna do a round two, and this time I'm gonna make sure it's all right. I've actually got I recorded with American Huddle and Stony the other day, so I've got to get that finalized and uploaded, but that'll be a good one. And then I'm doing Bitcoin Atheists.
Nice. Yeah, the audio is
I
always
want to do some
interesting.
provocative.
Oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
I was just going to say, I want to do some provocative discussions, kind of one-off. Like, I don't want to do just interview type podcasts. I just want to sort of have these open discussions with people I really respect and kind of drill into different ideas and concepts and shit. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves from here.
Yeah. I mean, it's getting into the podcasting sphere has been really fun for me because it gives me an excuse to sit down with really smart people and just pick their brains for an hour or so. It's been a huge learning experience for me. Definitely has been pretty shaping. Yeah, you've been pretty influential on me in my Bitcoin journey. I think I heard you for the first time on Peter's podcast, and then I really enjoyed your episode with Guy that you did recently. That was the death of nuance. That one was fun. But yeah, how did you get into doing or believing in personal sovereignty and kind of the limitations or total end of the state as we know it?
It was a gradual process, man. So like, I guess as a young kid, I was always like, I came from a broken family. My parents split up when we were young, and we went through that whole rigmarole when we were kids. And I was also the oldest child, so I kind of had this position, I guess, amongst the kids of the family where I had to take care of things, and I wasn't as looked after, particularly not like my little sister. My middle brother was a little bit different. He was less responsible out of us, but I always had this sort of air of responsibility. And then when I left school and went to university, I kind of left home as well and moved in by myself. And again, I just had this, I had to be responsible for myself. And I didn't have really a backstop or someone to help me out or bail me out at any point in my life. In fact, an interesting thing happened early on was I had my identity stolen when I was 20 or something like that. And some dude pulled out a credit card on my name and went on a spending spree in fucking Hong Kong and destroyed my credit rating. So I could never get any credit. I could never get any loans. I couldn't get anything. So like, I kind of had to literally build myself up from scratch, and anything that I ever had, like I had to kind of make it. And it was, I mean, you know, I've made loads of mistakes along the way. Like I've, you know, made money, lost money. I've, you know, had fucking great ideas and then I've blown them up by being too brazen and all sorts of stuff like that. But yeah, all throughout my life, just that entrepreneurial part of me just set, I think, the foundation for personal responsibility as an idea. And then, so that was sort of probably one element. The other element that really inspired me was, I think from an early age, I started looking into personal development. And I think for me, the greatest voice in that space is by far Tony Robbins. Like there's all these personal development dickheads everywhere. And particularly, like, I mean, he started the industry, and, you know, these days, 90% of the clowns out there are just, you know, they're just parroting stuff that he said, you know, 10, 20, 30 years ago. And they're losers in real life that go around like coaching other people, right? So, you know, you've got this sort of epidemic of dumbass life coaches who don't make their own bed, but, you know, tell other people to make theirs. And that kind of stuff I find repulsive because, you know, there's no real substance there, or there's no authenticity. But Robbins is very different. Like he's walked the walk. He's been around for fucking 40 something years. He built that industry single-handedly, and he's just got this level of depth about him that I find extremely rare in people that I meet. So his whole philosophy really boils down to, again, personal responsibility, you know, and particularly in the fields of psychology and emotional intelligence, is, you know, he basically educates people and helps them claim ownership of their lives, their emotions, their outlook, and helps them get to being at cause instead of at effect of the world. And that had a profound experience on me, because I've always, you know, I've that helped me really own everything in my life. Like, you know, I own the good and the bad. Like if I make a bad decision, it's on fucking me. It's not somebody else. Like, so I really became repulsed by any sort of blame and any sort of shifting of responsibility onto anyone else. And, you know, those two things, I was extremely primed for, I guess, Bitcoin when I came around to actually looking into it more. And as I started to do that, you know, the element of personal responsibility that you get with Bitcoin is just, it just aligned with me really, really, really deeply. And I mean, yes, there's risks with personal responsibility, you know, like you don't have anyone else to go to when shit hits the fan, but just that notion of it's me, it's on me, it's not on anyone else, just really resonated with me. And then I guess I can wrap up that journey to now, which is in the last, like, it was funny, I was looking at my Audible list today. I've got about 300 books in there, and it's funny, like the earlier books were all things like you know, entrepreneurial, you know, things like Hard Thing About Hard Things, or 0 to 1, or there was, you know, the Steve Jobs' story and things like that, or 33 Strategies of War, or 48 Laws of Power, like Robert Greene. And it was sort of like personal development and business. But these days it's sort of really evolved into philosophy, ethics, and economics. So, you know, you'll see like Rothbard and Peterson and all that sort of stuff in my Audible now. So it's kind of evolved to like the next tier of personal responsibility, but within the context of society and human action, which, you know, fundamentally is economics. So it's kind of like a long answer to your question, but like I was primed through entrepreneurship, primed through looking at psychology and emotion, particularly through the lens of responsibility, you know, whether, you know, that's sort of categorized as NLP, Tony Robbins' work, etc. And then most recently, things like the sovereign individual, or libertarianism, anarchism, like, you know, your Rothbards, etc., who basically, again, put personal individual sovereignty as the locus of everything that happens in society. And that's where it all starts from. That's where it, you know, we sort of radiate outwards from there. And I just it's not, for me, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. And, you know, anyone who doesn't believe that, there's only two things: they're either ignorant, or they're malicious. And it's okay to be ignorant, so long as you're willing to, you know, move away from ignorance and learn. And that's what I think that, you know, everyone's path is, fundamentally. So anyway, I'll throw it back to you. That's sort of my long answer to the question.
Yeah, that's an awesome answer, and I didn't know that about you. It's always interesting to hear how people's life circumstances influence them, and how different people in a family might respond to circumstances differently. And I think it brings up the idea of, I mean, there was a few things that I want to talk about in what you said, but like the idea of ideology being potentially driven by personality. I forgot, I had somebody on the podcast that brought that up, where I think it might have been Jimmy Song who was talking about that. But yeah, uh, I kind of had a similar experience to you in that regard of, like, you know, having a family that was pretty fractured, and learning how to take care of myself from an early age and take on that personal responsibility. And, you know, I think when you deal with a lot of pain early on in life, it makes it easier to see the hypocrisy of what's going on in society. And um, some regard too, I think it makes people more vulnerable to scammers. And, you know, I see a lot of our society being driven by scammers. Like, I think the Federal Reserve is a big scam. I think the political system's a big scam. I think the media is a big scam. Education, you know, all these things. Uh, and Bitcoin, you know, was definitely my big step into the sunlight, because for the first time I was able to have that self-sovereignty. Um, and I didn't really realize it at first. It took me a while of getting into it to really, like, begin to scratch the surface of what that meant and what Bitcoin meant, because I was so indoctrinated into, like, these different ideologies of, you know, the state being the end all be all, and, you know, this is what money is, and, you know, whatever. But yeah, I have a background in social work, and that's what I thought was going to be my, you know, career, was being a therapist and, you know, working with people in terrible situations. Um, and I realized that the way that our society is built, you know, a lot of the problems are just going to get worse and kind of continue, and there wouldn't be any real solution to those issues unless we fix money, and really empower people, you know, because I feel like the way that the current mental health and drug addiction field works is it's not about empowering people. In a lot of ways, it's, you know, just predatorial and a big scam.
It was, yeah,
And
it's about perpetuating, victimhood more than anything else, because there's very little profit in the current model that we have, like in the fiat system that we live in. That there's profit in having dependent individuals, not sovereign individuals. In a free market paradigm, it's you know, it's profitable to have sovereign individuals. Now, you know, so it's basically anachronistic or antithetical to the way society is structured at the moment. Is, you know, if it's fiat, like, it's all about debt and you know, the you know, placing the burden elsewhere, or, you know, socializing the losses, or creating victims, or creating dependencies. Like, all of these things are that they basically remove sovereignty from the individual, and that's the only way you can technically you know, get ahead or function in a fiat type society where you know, personal agency is just continually eroded. Now, that's not the foundation upon which you know, call it Western civilization was initially built on. Western civilization emerged as the leader because it recognized early on that the individual was sovereign, and, you know, it kind of built rules and systems in place that kind of originally emerged with Christianity before Christianity became its own institution, you know, of dogma. But, you know, those sort of principles emerged there. And then, you know, the initial incarnations of the nation state were also, you know, they existed to preserve the sovereignty of the individual, right? But again, over time, they perverted, because, you know, the optimization was, you know, it started off as protecting your rights to, you know, with this undertone of safety, which then over time, you know, has fucking degenerated into enforcing safety. Like we will make sure you are safe if we have to beat you into submission to make you safe. It's like fucking so weird, right? I was watching this ridiculous video the other day of like this kid's in like a, I don't know, like it was some sort of pub or like a little, betting place or whatever it was, and he didn't have a mask on, and the security guard fucking choked him out. He fucking fell, smashed his head on the ground, and he got thrown out of the thing. It's like, for your safety, I'm going to fucking kill you. Like, what kind of a planet are we living on? But that's all. That's the slippery slope of, eroding all personal sovereignty, individual agency from society, and we end up in a situation where, yeah, we no longer have the choice. Like responsibility, spawns from choice, and choice is, systematically being removed. Now, part of that you could argue is, some sort of conspiratorial fucking corruption, with, people in power wanting to maintain power. But it's also just, we are as much to blame as, the quote unquote overlords, because, we have all gotten comfortable, particularly like each generation that's grown up after the prior generation, we've become comfortable with just, getting someone else to do it, like, and not actually taking responsibility for ourselves. So we're just as much to blame as the Federal Reserve. We're just as much to blame as the state, because we helped empower it, we helped feed it, and we helped, indoctrinate our, subsequent generations with, the same idea of like dependency on another. We've sort of infected ourselves with these ideas of rights instead of responsibilities, without realizing that, one person's right is another person's fucking responsibility. And that's it's really sad, and it's really pathetic. We've hollowed out society. We've got this fucking sheep collectivist, mob that's running around now, that's mindless and soulless and heartless and faceless, with made up of weak individuals. And that's, that can only go for so long, I guess, until there's no one left that wants to be responsible, and, the whole thing falls in on itself. And, where are we on that time scale? I don't know. But, it seems that this year's accelerated that to a large degree. And I guess the existence of, works by philosophers, whether it's your Jordan Petersons or your Tony Robbins, or or inventions like Bitcoin, that they're sort of like accelerating, the move back towards personal responsibility and sovereignty again. So it's an exciting time to be alive, but it's also, evidently a ridiculous time to be alive. So it's interesting shit, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that has been coming up a lot in 2020 is there's a lot of people out there questioning and really struggling to distinguish what's real from what's false. And I think it's because a lot of individuals have these perspectives that are created for them. They turn to like the institutions that are supposed to be trusted for shaping and viewing their viewpoints on what they should be doing and what's right and what's wrong, instead of really deciding for themselves and being educated on it, looking around at their community. And it's been kind of interesting to watch that happen in my community in Tucson, because we have a lot of major structural issues. Like I consider Tucson a lot of what is wrong with America, because there's a few industries here. There's extreme wealth inequality, unfair wealth inequality. So like the industry is dominated by one public university, that the public university system's pretty broken. We've got all the defense contractors out here. We've got a large like the biggest Air Force base. So, you're working for the machine if you're going to be successful here, which is kind of, just tough, I think. And uh, stepping outside of that, I've found a lot of peace during this time, in the chaos and not getting wrapped up in all the nonsense, because I feel like, I pay less attention to the noise going around me and pay closer attention to the people around me and what I see. Um, uh, and I think that's like one of the beneficial things about decentralization is, instead of being fed a narrative to believe of what, the world is actually, what's actually going on in the world, you can experience, actually experience your own experience of what's happening in the world, and interacting with people and, just being real. Um, so I think that's cool. I mean, we see it like with people just hating each other, ripping signs out of people's yards for, having a belief that's different than theirs. And uh, there's a lot of dehumanization that's going on. It's like, if you believe this, you're, you know, less than human. And I think that's
Yeah.
really scary. But yeah.
Well, it's yeah. I mean, that's a symptom actually of again, collectivism instead of individualism. So, but by labeling an individual as part of a collective, you can then attribute, uh, you know, characteristics of the collective upon that individual without knowing the individual. So so it's a white person who's a male, so he's immediately a fascist, a misogynist, a transphobe, a fucking homophobe, and everything else. Irrespective of who the guy is, it doesn't matter. But it's like, it's the identity that matters, and this is one of the issues with society. Again, when you remove the individual and you remove responsibility, you can do one of two things. You can prescribe bad attributes to the group you don't like, and on the flip side, if you place yourself in a group that you've prescribed as having good attributes, you can behave like a fucking lunatic, but you're not. You're absolved of any responsibility because of your group identity. So if I'm part of a minority, and depending on how oppressed my minority is, I can behave like a complete fucking lunatic, and I'm not held responsible because woe is me. I'm part of a minority. Someone else is responsible for my actions, and again, you have another individual. So it's really fucking poisonous. Like, on the other side, you have this individual who might be an absolutely fantastic, upstanding, person, and then they're going to be held responsible for somebody else's fucking actions. Like, again, this whole white guilt thing. It's like, okay, a couple of people fucking traded slaves. Guess what? The whole fucking world did it, by the way, and much of the world still does it today. But no one's pointing fingers at those. They're just pointing fingers at the one they can throw rocks at because America was the first one to kind of abolish it and do something about it, and then open up discourse about it. So now we throw fucking rocks at them, whereas those atrocities are happening today, like, for example, in China, in Africa, in fucking South America, in the Middle East, but no one says anything about those. So it's like, this is, again, one of the big problems with removing the individual as the centerpiece of society and moving towards the collectivist ideal, which also ties back into why libertarianism or like anarchism is like the natural state, because it really boils down to the individual being responsible for their actions, and that's the only thing you really have responsibility over, unless someone else wants to pay you to take responsibility for some of their things, which is what the free market is effectively. It's I don't want to drive my car today, so I'll pay a taxi driver to drive me, so now he's responsible for the driving, but that requires a transaction, you know what I mean? So that's like the free market. That's where you blend anarchism with capitalism, and that's why I think the natural state of things is anarcho-capitalism, and I think that's the closest natural state of human existence, and it's where we're trending back towards, because we're sort of like in a renaissance of responsibility, as opposed to the decaying status quo, which is this world of collectivist rights that is clearly fucking failing. Like, no one can tell me that it's been successful by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people, when they hear about the demonization of the white male or whatever, they'll turn their brains off and be kind of pushing back against it, and may feel that well, the patriarchy, or whatever group they label white males as, they'll just completely negate it. But I think the important thing to take away from it is, like, we've seen this happen in history in very devastating, terrible ways. When you look at Nazi Germany and what they did to the Jewish people, where they just completely demonized a whole people group, and took them to the gas chambers. And people might think that's kind of like a hyperbolic example, but I think it's really important to line that out of the dangers of that collective labeling of a certain people group as being really dangerous, and the importance of individualism in it. But yeah, kind of going towards anarcho-capitalism as being the natural order of things. So, what we see periodically, throughout history, is the government will come in and be very heavy-handed with regulations on certain industries, or outright make things illegal. And we see black markets created as a result of it, because people want and need goods. And like looking at North Korea, which is probably the most extreme example, there's a flourishing black market that allows people to eat. And without it, even though it's incredibly illegal, without it, people would be starving. And then, like, a little less crazy example, in the United States, marijuana has been federally illegal forever, and yet just about everybody has smoked it. And like what I know from, so I was having a conversation. So I've worked in like drug treatment for a long time, and I personally, don't really care for drugs and don't touch them myself, and I don't drink, but I believe pretty strongly that all drugs should be legalized, and openly available for people. One, because I think it's safer. So like I have a lot of respect for what Ross Ulbricht did with, or well, maybe allegedly did with the Silk Road, because I feel like it made things a lot safer for people. But what I know from like being a kid was it was a lot easier for me to get my hands on drugs being illegal than it was to get my hands on alcohol, which was legal, which is kind of an interesting thing. And so, in me caring about kids, I think that it would be safer for them if the drugs were legal. Like if you could walk into a store and buy heroin, but you had to be, 21 to do it. First of all, it wouldn't be laced with fentanyl, it wouldn't be, it's amazing to see like how that epidemic has just devastated my community. Like it's pretty, we driving through town, it's not unusual to see somebody laying on the ground, with a drug overdose, probably due to fentanyl, because they put it in everything now. So they would take that aspect of it away, and then I think it would make it harder. But yeah, so it's kind of interesting when you say that anarcho-capitalism is the natural order of things, because I think that's pretty true, and we just see the examples of it happening over and over again. It's something that is always, it's like trying to regulate and control markets is kind of like trying to swim upriver. It's like a exhausting effort that's going to fail eventually. So yeah, I thought that was kind of cool and
Yeah,
interesting.
I mean, it always will, because like the thing is that if I quote Tony Robbins again, is like that which you what was it, that which you suppress, you know, be, oh man, I can't remember the exact saying now, so I'm going to probably butcher this, but I think it's something like to do with that which you suppress, becomes your obsession. So it's and it was the same with alcohol prohibition. Like, I mean, again, and this is again the hubris and the arrogance and the ignorance of state-based thinking and central planning, is that in the states, like, arrogance in prohibiting alcohol, they actually fucking created the biggest mafias in American history. Like, and in the drug war, they created the most violent drug fucking gangs and cartels in history. So they did 1,000 times more damage than would have been done if they just got the fuck out of the way and let people do what they want to do. Simple as that. So all, like, in creating sanctions in the Middle East and getting involved in everyone's fucking shit there, they created the most violent terrorists. Like, so every time these clowns come in and try and inhibit something, they create 1,000 times more fucking problems. The lockdowns are the same thing. To try and like beat an invisible enemy that's a fucking virus, they shut down the entire economy. They destroyed everyone's lives. They broke supply chains, and they fucking destroyed. They literally hollowed out the entire middle class. They destroyed all the small businesses, and they strengthened the technocratic monopolies that now they're beholden to. So it's like, you fucking morons. You guys continue to do the same thing every single time, and this is why it's like it's it will fail. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that this whole statist collectivist experiment is going to fail again, as it's failed every single other time. My only concern is that when the clowns blow themselves up again, like, how many of us good, virtuous, intelligent people do they take with them? That's my only concern. Like, they cannot win, they cannot succeed. The two biggest dangers is that they chuck a fucking USSR and nuke us all, like those idiots did when they blew themselves up in Chernobyl, or do they succeed in creating some runaway fucking AI that makes us all obsolete, in their bid to create a utopia? Like, that's the two biggest risks here. Is they either blow us all up in their own arrogance and stupidity, or they make us obsolete by trying to plug us into some fucking omnipresent technocratic future utopia where humans are second grade. Like, it's so I cannot even fathom the level of stupidity that's required for somebody to support either of those pathways. So yeah, I don't know, I've just lost any remorse or patience for support of the state. And again, I didn't start out like this. This was really accelerated for me over the last year or two, and the more evident the stupidity becomes in the world, like, the more I realize that this is it's just not going to end pretty. And it also just makes me so incredibly thankful for Bitcoin, because that's kind of the one moat. It's the one thing, the one island that they can't touch, that we can sort of protect our wealth. And as the thing falls on top of their heads, and by and large on top of all of our fucking heads, we'll at least have been able to protect our wealth in the process. Mm-hmm. And that is pretty damn important, because we're going to be the ones who are having to rebuild the clusterfuck that collapses down the track. And I mean, who better than people of virtue, of foresight, of good values, and of individual sovereignty. And that's fundamentally going to be the Bitcoiners. So a ray of hope exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that was really eye-opening for me was reading the Bitcoin Standard, and one of the ideas presented in it was just how these governments through fiat currencies can fund these forever wars. And, in my lifetime, there's never really been a justified American war, that I can point to and say, yes, we did the right thing here. It's been, we've been in Iraq, we've been in Afghanistan, we've been in all these countries that, nobody really knows about, 700 official military bases scattered across the world.
Yeah.
All funded by the money printer, ruining, devastating people's lives. Like, I know, like, just something like in conversation with people when, they bring up like, how we need to take out these terrorists or, whatever. I just say, if some foreign entity came into my country and blew up my family, I'd probably be pretty radical and pissed, and do some crazy stuff. But, at the end of the day, what it comes down to and what I value more than just about anything is my conscience and integrity. And so if that means that, and I don't want to do anything like radical or crazy in the sense of like, terroristic activities or, I'm not like a Boogaloo boy or anything like that. But, when it comes to saying like, I'm not going to be complicit in these atrocities, that's something that I really value. And if that comes to, leading me to being black bagged, like I'm kind of growing more and more okay with that because I value, I place a lot of value on freedom of thought and expression more than just the freedom of not being like there's some people that I really look to and respect in history, and there's two that I bring up a lot. There's Corrie ten Boom, who hid Jews in Nazi Germany and ended up getting sent to the concentration camps as a result of it, even though she wasn't Jewish. There's Friedrich Bonhoeffer, who ended up dying in a Nazi prison for criticizing the state. There's Viktor Frankl, who was able to attain in just the most horrendous human conditions I could ever imagine, was able to walk away from it with his he was able to attain some semblance of personal sovereignty in there. And you read these stories and they're so harrowing. And I know that like, I just don't want to be complicit in this. Like the government lies all the time. And like one of the most shocking things that I think where I really got sick to my stomach and said, I've had enough of this and I don't want to be complicit in it anymore was, I was watching an Oliver Stone documentary on the Vietnam War, and the official number of casualties by the U.S. government of like civilian casualties in Vietnam still to this day is 250,000, which is an egregious number regardless. But the official Vietnamese number of casualties is like somewhere around 2 million people, and the discrepancy between those two official numbers is just mind-boggling to me. Like even to this, like there's been no real attempt in the American government, from what I've seen, to say that was egregiously wrong, and we need to do something about it, and there needs to be justice involved with this war that was unjustified, where all these innocent people were killed, and
well, I mean, that would require them to take responsibility, right? Which ain't gonna happen.
And without Bitcoin, there's no way to push back against it.
There isn't. Yeah, there isn't. Exactly. It's funny. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who she's really dear to me, and it's really strange because she gets all this, and she sees all the atrocities of the state. She's starting to homeschool her kids and moving out, all that stuff. But it's funny, she's like, I don't know how else to fight against this. And I'm like, I keep telling her, just fucking buy Bitcoin. Like, you need to defund the idiots that are doing this. There's no other way. But it's strange because she can't seem to like get her head wrapped around that part. Like, she's like, oh, how does like buying Bitcoin, stop them? And it's really unfortunate, because I can imagine how many people are out there that sort of see the atrocities of the state, but can't seem to make the connection between the state feeds off fiat money. Like, it has to feed somehow, and it literally feeds in two ways: inflation and taxation. And the only form of wealth, or money that exists that is immune from both taxation and inflation, is literally Bitcoin. So by doing that, we all take our resources off the table, and we starve the beast. And that's why it's the most powerful form of protest. And I don't know what it needs to happen for people to slowly like come around to that idea, but like it's almost, I mean, like, buying Bitcoin is not only something that's good for your financial future and your wealth, but it's a fucking duty. Like, if you give a shit about this world, if you give a shit about future generations, if you give a shit about making the place a better, making it a better place for you, your children, and your children's children to live, like, it is a fucking duty to be buying Bitcoin and to moving everything you have into it. Simple as that. That there's no other way to win this battle, or to win this war, because this ain't a fucking battle anymore. The battles are with the shitcoiners and the forks and the dumb cunts, but the war itself is the separation of money and state, and that's the big that's the big picture thing here. And I'm not concerned, like, that this isn't a matter of if. I think Bitcoin is going to win, because like we have, like I said this on the podcast with Stoney and Hodl, I was like, we've got gravity on our side. Like, we have physics, we have the second law of fucking thermodynamics on our side with Bitcoin. The other side, the statists and the collectivists and the central bankers, they have a fucking Ponzi fiat scheme that's an aberration of nature. Who do you think is going to win that? On a long enough time scale, that shit is all obsolete in comparison to Bitcoin. The only question again is, do we blow ourselves up before then? Do we make ourselves obsolete with some stupid AI creation? Do we enslave ourselves in some totalitarian fucking state? Or do we just have to endure another 2, 3, 4, 5 decades of slavery, or modern indentured servitude, until the whole thing collapses? I don't know. That's all it is. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and what that period looks like in between now and the effective collapse of the state and the rise of Bitcoin. So yeah, that's the thing that troubles me and makes me think and wonder. And I don't have an answer or a solution to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of the most powerful parts of Bitcoin. Most people like me get into it because of the number go up aspect of it. But yeah, so you talked about your friend's roadblock to understanding this, and I think this is a pretty common aspect. So I had this awesome guy on the podcast named Michael Rechtenwald, and he's kind of like a Jordan Peterson type, where he was a college professor that got attacked by cancel culture, and not for being racist or anything, but just pushing back against the totalitarian aspect of it, and frequent speaker at the Mises Institute. And but one of the things that he talked about was and one of the things I find really fascinating is cult ideology. And I feel like leaving the fiat system is just as difficult to do as somebody that's heavily indoctrinated in a cult, because they have all this, mind control aspects. And I'm not trying to get like crazy and conspiratorial, but there's just so much indoctrination that goes into it that forms your opinion and worldview. And to really jump into Bitcoin, that has to be shattered, and there has to be like a full-on detox from it that I think is really, really difficult for people, because at the end of the day, people want safety, they want security, and it's a really big threat to acknowledge that the institutions that they've grown up to trusting have been abusive towards them. And
yeah, it's a really tough one because I guess two things there. So Peterson always talks about this idea of, you know, learning, growing, and evolving as a human being requires you to burn off a part of you that existed before, and that burning off a part of you is difficult because you're leaving something behind that, you know, was a part of your identity. Like, again, I'll quote Tony Robbins. You know, he's got a saying which is the strongest force in the human psyche is the need to stay consistent with one's identity. And, you know, we develop this identity over time. And a big part of that identity development process is these state indoctrination systems, which I call schools, which are called schools. And, you know, we take these impressionable young human beings who are open and, you know, interested and unique and diverse, and we beat the individuality out of them for 12 years. And we wonder why they come out as fucking mindless drones who have these preconceived notions and biases about how the world works, and, you know, what the state is, and that, you know, they must be dependent on the state. And, you know, everyone sort of comes out with Stockholm syndrome, you know, believing that, you know, in order to have roads we must pay taxes. It's like, you know, chucking a rail pal, right? And it's a difficult leap. You literally need to burn off a big chunk of yourself that you believe to be true all of your life. And that's, some people do it in one fell swoop, but, you know, by and large, most people, it's an incremental process. They need to get there. And I don't know, the further down the rabbit hole you got, like I have challenges with this these days, is like, I'm so far down now that I find it hard to relate to people and even communicate with people on those sort of first steps. I tried to do that with that Peter McCormack podcast recently, and I think I did a better job of it there, like trying to take it from first principles and, you know, kind of finding a common ground and, you know, having that discussion. So, you know, I kind of try and point people to that discussion now, but it's still really hard because, you know, people have to go on that journey, and it's much easier to burn bits and pieces of yourself off in the pursuit of truth than it is to burn a big chunk of yourself off. But at the same time, it's one of those, like, can people burn a big chunk of themselves off really quickly? And I would say yes, because you look at someone like Michael Saylor, went from no coiner to fucking OG Bitcoiner in the space of 9 months. You know, or 12 months, or however long it took him to really sort of go down the rabbit hole and make that decision. Now, that requires a shitload of courage. And unfortunately, courage is also another thing that gets beaten out of us from a young age, because, you know, society wants to opt for conformity over courage, because it's, you know, it's much harder to herd wolves than it is to herd sheep. And it's you know, it's unfortunately the truth of the fiat and state kind of apparatus or paradigm that we live in. So yeah, coming back to my original point is, yeah, people need to burn off a chunk of themselves, and it's not easy, but the benefit of doing that is literally discovering something new. And with something like Bitcoin, that the benefit is absolutely fucking extraordinary. Like there is not a contrarian bet that ever existed in the history of humanity that could compress so much upside in so little time that Bitcoin does. Like, I think that there's never been a time that so much upside or potential has been compressed into such a short period of time like Bitcoin, right? So we're going to see the transfer of, you know, all of the wealth from the history of humanity being transferred in the next 50 to 150 years, somewhere in there. And like, I mean, I don't even know how to describe the significance of that. And you know, once people awaken to that, you know, like, it is worth burning off 99% of yourself if you have to, so that you can have an opportunity to ride that transformation. Like, it is so profound. It's not even funny.
Yeah, I think when I try and explain Bitcoin to people, I try to explain how it's just as revolutionary as the printing press was, where for the first time information could be distributed outside of the established monopolies over information, and it may even be more disruptive. It's I mean, for somebody that doesn't understand, you know, they might think that they're listening to foreign language as we're talking about these ideas. Like we talked a lot about war, and you know, these wars are funded by printing money. You know, they're funded by putting a gun to our head and taking our tax dollars. You know, shutting down our bank accounts or just taking money explicitly out of our bank accounts if we're not paying taxes. And you can't do that with Bitcoin. You know, they actually, if we were using Bitcoin as the money, they would have to justify their actions to us for the first time. And I don't know how long, because they, you know, we would have to willingly give the money over instead of being so easily coerced into doing it, and that would change the ball game pretty largely. Let's talk about shitcoins real quick.
Yeah, sure. My favorite.
Yeah, maybe a good topic to end on. So I've been getting blasted by XRP people. So why is XRP not the solution?
Shit. I mean, I've made a video about this, saying that, you know, Bitcoin is not, Bitcoin stands against crypto, and like I like to call it crapto, because it's, I mean, Bitcoin is fundamentally a sound money revolution, and you know, it's the 0 to 1 moment. It is, you know, money is a, you know, it's a omnipresent communication medium that binds us all. It's how energy and time permeates through society, and you know, it's a single medium fundamentally, particularly if you've got a global money. So you know, you've got all these elements which are, you know, money is winner takes all. Money is a convergent network. Money is this singular sort of omnipresent fabric that permeates everything. So we're all going to end up on a single standard, and that standard requires a series of attributes that, you know, nothing else that we have on the planet actually has. And you know, Bitcoin has all of them. You know, it is fundamentally doesn't have a head of the snake to chop off. It is perfectly durable. It is perfectly portable. It is perfectly scarce, fixed in supply. It is perfectly you know, recognizable, perfectly homogeneous. It is perfectly you know, divisible. So it's got every single attribute that you could want of money. It performs the functions of money perfectly. So it's, you know, it's the ultimate store of value. It's the ultimate uncensorable medium of exchange, and it's the perfect unit of account, because we know exactly how much there is. We can run the numbers perfectly. Like, there's no ambiguity about it. So it's like, it does it perfectly, and you cannot get better than that level of perfection. And then, like, most important, it's been placed outside of the reach of any one of us, or any group of us. So as a result, like, we've got it. Like, we've got the philosopher's stone, if I'm going to use another Jordan Peterson phrase. So anything else is just fiat again, whether it's government fiat, whether it's from Zimbabwe or the USA or Vitalik or fucking Garlic House, whatever his name is. or any other dickhead who decides to print their own money, like all they are is just variations on the same Ponzi scheme, you know, and whatever technology they try and claim they have behind it doesn't fucking matter. If the technology is fantastic, it'll end up, you know, leveraging Bitcoin as the form of money, and, you know, adding its technology layer on top. That's all that's going to happen. And that just strengthens Bitcoin's network effect. So it is literally Bitcoin or shitcoin. There's nothing else there. And like, you know, when you hear idiots like Raoul Pal, like who I've always thought was an idiot, and I was really disappointed with the whole Bitcoin community when they started licking his balls for the last, you know, year, is, you know, that clown just showed his true colors, who doesn't understand Bitcoin. He doesn't get it. He doesn't know what this, you know, he doesn't know what the separation of money and state means. You know, he kind of views Bitcoin in the lens of gold. It's like, all right, moron, like if that's how you view it. And then, you know, he tries to describe XRP as copper. What a fucking clown. Like I have no remorse for people like that. So it's, you know, I hope he goes all in on XRP. I really do. I hope he sells his Bitcoin, goes all in on XRP. I hope he becomes an XRP shill, or whatever else shitcoin is coming up tomorrow. I hope that he literally goes down that path, because then he can, you know, I call it natural wealth redistribution. Capitalism is the ultimate natural wealth redistribution, because it takes money from dumb and it gives it to smart, which is where it belongs. And, you know, the more of that we have, the better. So I'm happy to buy all of his Bitcoin as he sells it for some other shitcoin. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I can say there about, you know, these shit coins, whether it's XRP, whether it's anything. It's like, you know, they can do whatever they want, but all of the wealth, all the value of everything that we measure in society is all going to be sucked up by Bitcoin, and everything's going to be measured in Bitcoin. So if you think there's a better opportunity than that, you're either incredibly stupid or you're incredibly dumb. It's one of the two options. So, you know, pick your poison.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty awesome explanation. I'm going to use that. Capitalism is the ultimate wealth redistribution. And when I'm arguing with my socialist friends, I think that's a fantastic thing. Well, this was a good conversation. I think it was pretty dangerous. We covered.
You think we're gonna get canceled?
Canceled, or the thought police might come after us for it. I'm surprised Zoom didn't censor us yet.
Touche.
We didn't talk about Hong Kong yet, so that's why we didn't get censored. But
apparently,
I've got my. You know, it was kind of funny. I ran into this really weird Chinese cult one time, and they gave me a. It's a weird story, but it was an interesting conversation with them. They were in the U.S. and they gave me a Hong Kong pin that I wear on my backpack everywhere I go, or Tiananmen Square pin, actually, even worse than Hong Kong. Even more of a dangerous discussion. But yeah, where are some good places people can follow your work?
I guess Twitter's probably the best. So at Aleks Svetski. My name is spelled with a KS, not an X. So ALEKS, Svetski. And but that's my more brash, abrasive kind of persona on there, because obviously you've got less characters. So, you know, and I'm always on the hunt for stupidity and wanting to, you know, beat someone over the head with something. So that's kind of my persona, and that's how I behave on Twitter. Whereas if you want sort of the more thought out version of me, look at my Medium, which is just svetsky.medium.com. And then thirdly, yeah, I've been doing some podcasts and discussions recently on the Wake Up podcast. So the best way to find that, and you can find all the links across Apple, Spotify, etc. But if you just type in anchor.fm/wake up pod, so not podcast but pod, you'll find it there, and you can sort of find all the YouTube links and everything like that from there. And yeah, man, that's basically the three key channels. And then obviously for those who know me, know that I run a Bitcoin DCA product called Amber. and that's sort of my entrepreneurial expression of, the my passion for this chapter of my life, which is Bitcoin. And so if that's the vehicle through which I not only get to talk about Bitcoin and represent it, but I can actually also help people migrate into it. So if you're in Australia, you can definitely use it. And yeah, we'll also be in the US soon. My plan is to be there over the coming few months, maybe a little bit longer. I don't know. We'll see. We'll make an announcement soon, but hopefully we can help people in the US stack some sats on autopilot in early 2021. So that's the plan.
Yeah, it's the best way to do it right there.
Absolutely.
Well, really appreciate your time. And yeah, that was a really fun conversation. I think these types of conversations, I joked about it being dangerous, and to some degree it is, because when you talk like this and you challenge authority, you challenge societal norms, it puts you at risk of being ridiculed and demonized and misrepresented. And I don't have enough of a big enough following to really like be in danger of that. But Aleks puts himself out there, and for all those things, and I'm sure he gets a lot of heat having the thought process and beliefs that he has. And I personally, I'm finding it more and more worth it, because if you don't push back against the mob, then terrible things happen. It's just like, we look at so many times in history of awful things that have happened. Like, we talked a little bit about Nazi Germany and how nobody did anything, and today we look at it and say, well, like, how can nobody have stopped the genocide of the Jews? And it's simple. Like, people didn't push back, and the people that did were imprisoned. And I gave a few examples of that, and I'm not saying we're quite there yet, but hopefully we don't have to be. Hopefully we can have these conversations ahead of time, to prevent atrocities from happening. And unfortunately, we do see awful things happening in our world today. We see slavery. That's been a topic that's come up with, like, what Apple's doing, with creating their smartphones and fighting against the U.S. regulators trying to ban products created by slave labor. And that's just where we're at. It's dark. It's not pleasant to think about. But, for us to really live in a good, pleasant world, we have to have these types of conversations. We have to address what's wrong in our society to fix it, and to acknowledge that it's there. And the coolest aspect of it is, Bitcoin gives people a voice that, typically would get silenced. Greatest example of that is WikiLeaks. There's a huge consensus that Julian Assange should be pardoned, and Edward Snowden should be pardoned today. And one of the things that has allowed WikiLeaks to survive, the only thing that has allowed them to survive and to push back against government war crimes, has been Bitcoin. And that's just like a beautiful, powerful example of this. But yeah, if you want to follow my work, I do the podcast, I'm on Patreon, and I would enjoy your support. I try to make it really accessible to everybody. I know times are tough right now financially for a lot of people out there. So I'm not trying to make expensive, exclusive content. You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month. And I do that on purpose because, one, it's just like a cool way to like have people feel empowered in the community, to be able to support somebody that, that they might believe in. But yeah, I don't want to like beg for your money or anything like that. But yeah, you can support me on Patreon. You can send me Bitcoin if you like the conversations I'm having. It's much appreciated. But I want to be a resource for you. If you've got questions about Bitcoin and you want to learn more, it's first time you're wading into this and you're like, oh, this sounds kind of fishy. Like I want to explore this topic more. Feel free to reach out to me. I love to have these types of conversations with people. You can shoot me a message on Twitter, on LinkedIn, email me. I'd be happy to set up a Zoom call. I had somebody do that yesterday for Thanksgiving, and I'm excited to talk to that person. But yeah, hope you had a good holiday. Hope the government restrictions weren't too hardcore and ruined it. I had a good holiday, and thanks for listening to this conversation.